The term personality is part of everyday speech. For example, I heard somebody say the other day that Jay isn't the best looking guy, but hey, he has a nice personality. When they made that statement, they probably used the term to denote the manner in which Jay acts across a variety of situations. When psychologists use the term personality, they use it to describe not only an individual's reputation and the way that person acts and is known socially, but also the internal processes that create that reputation. In this section, I would like to discuss three things. First, why assess personality? Second, how personality is actually assessed, and then give you some examples of personality tests such as the NEO and the MMPI, which I'll go into in more detail. So why should we assess personality at all? Here are some areas where personality assessment is used on a regular basis. The first area is work and career. We call them vocational assessments or career counselling, and they aim to measure whether personal attributes would suit a particular work environment. They can be used to assess aspects of individual behaviour, opinions or attitudes, as well as interests, values and motivations. They can help identify your own natural preferences, and the results can then be compared to the characteristics considered to be essential for specific jobs. Similarly, in human resources, personality assessments are used for recruitment and selection, whereby psychologists match personality to work environments. I've also used them in teams to improve team performance by identifying how team members interact. Another major area is in military and police services, where personality tests are used to screen out unsuitable people and also to identify leadership potential. Personality assessment is used in the clinical setting. For example, there are things called personality disorders. Unfortunately, personality disorders is a chronic disturbance in one's relations with oneself, with others, and with the environment that results in distress or failure to fulfill social roles and obligations. They're also used to look at the impact on therapy, for example. How agreeable a person is may impact on how a person engages in therapy. So a personality assessment prior to embarking on therapy can be very predictive for how that therapy might go. Personality testing is also used in couples or family therapy. For example, there's a concept called attachment, and there are assessments that look at attachment between family members and between couples. This can also be predictive in how one engages in therapy within a family or couple situation. So where do we find information about people's personality? A good place to start is through self-report. This is where we find information about the person being assessed, which is actually provided by the person themselves. However, there are some problems in this regard, as it assumes that people are able to report their personality accurately, and that does require some self-knowledge. Secondly, it also assumes that people are willing to report their personality accurately, and of course, there is that problem of social desirability responding. As the name implies, social desirability is the answering of questions to look good or to appear socially acceptable to others. So you can see that the accuracy of self-reports hinge on people's ability and willingness to respond honestly, especially when questions focus on sensitive topics such as sexual habits or drug use or ideas around prejudice. Self-reports may be distorted by social desirability or social desirability bias. Self-reports are limited because they can't be used with individuals and in situations that do not meet these assumptions. For example, children below a certain age do not have adequate self-knowledge. Another example is when inmates are going for a parole evaluation. That's where social desirability, the motivation to look good, will overpower and overwhelm the aspect of responding truthfully. Another way of getting information is through informant reports. So that's where we get reports of personality traits by others, your spouse, parents, friends, acquaintances. A typical item may be, for example, my spouse has a vivid imagination, or my child is friendly, or my roommate is messy. For example, there's one assessment called Personality Inventory for Children, and this is really a standardized interview for parents, not the child. Like self-reports, these informant reports assume that others are able and willing to provide accurate information. Another issue with informant reports is that people may have limited knowledge about some personality traits or characteristics, especially those internal states such as thoughts and feelings. How do they really know what someone's thoughts and feelings are? And how do they know what they're thinking or feeling? And of course, other informants may be motivated to lie. For example, a mother of a murderer might say, "He could never hurt anybody." Obviously, perhaps a biased assessment. A third way of sourcing information about personality is through observation, and that is observation of behaviour or life outcomes. So researchers can observe the behaviour of people to learn about their personality. Observational studies are more immune to social desirability because it's easier to fake responses in a questionnaire than to change behaviour which is being observed in the long term. Observational studies are often very expensive and often limited to behaviour in a laboratory setting. There are different procedures and formats for gaining information about someone's personality. The first and foremost, or the first and most common, are paper and pencil tests. For example, we want to understand about somebody's aggression, and we could give them a screening questionnaire called the Personality Assessment Inventory, which actually has a subscale on it that measures aggression, and that will allow us to measure the trait of aggression. There are also computerized assessments, and these are certainly becoming more prolific. The common problem in personality testing is that some respondents attempt to slant their answers to make a good impression, and as a result, test results become misleading. When respondents slant their answers or their answer scores on socially desirable traits, they become inflated or greater than they actually would be in the absence of response slanting. So many tests, including computerized tests, include a built-in feature to help detect when such responses or slanting or faking occur, and warns the tester when the results become unacceptable or unreliable. Another kind of measure is the Q-sort. What the respondent is asked to do is to actually sort a group of statements in rank order, ranging from most descriptive to least descriptive, typically presented on index cards. And some of the things that's on these cards may be, "I'm confident," or I try hard to please others," or "I'm uncomfortable in social situations." The person then rank orders these sorts of statements in terms of how well they apply to themselves. Another major way to assess somebody's personality is through interviews. And we can have structured interviews in which we may ask a specific set of questions, or we may have unstructured interviews where people talk and the assessor makes an assessment based on the unstructured information. Interviews can be done with individuals or with family members or acquaintances and other people who interact with this person. We also have behavioural observations, which I mentioned before, and in other areas where we record people's physiological responses. This, of course, overcomes some of the social desirability responding because it's much harder to fake or control responding. This is often used in sex offender treatment and assessment where the offender is presented with certain stimulating pictures and their physiological responses are measured in response to those stimuli. There are, of course, variations of tests as well. Here are some common distinctions. One common distinction are that of projective versus objective tests. I'll talk more about these types of tests later. There are other distinctions like unstructured tests, such as projective tests, and structured tests, for example, many personality inventories. And there are tests that look for observable qualities of personality and other tests that look for the hidden aspects of personality. I'll now address a variety of different tests and expand on some of these common distinctions. Personality would not be useful to psychologists if they had no way of measuring it. Personality testing offers a promise of detecting individual differences in personality in a rigorous fashion. But developing accurate tools to measure personality is actually easier said than done. Psychology's often, or it's long been plagued by a parade of dubious assessment measures. The next time you say so-and-so should have had her head examined, remember that this was literally done in the 19th century. Phrenology, as it became known, is the study of brain function. Specifically, phrenologists believed that different parts of the brain were responsible for different emotional and intellectual functions. Furthermore, they felt that these functions could be ascertained by measuring the bumps and indentations on your skull. That is, the shape of your skull revealed your character and talents. Related to the idea of phrenology was physiognomy. Physiognomy was popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, and it claimed to detect people's personality traits from their facial characteristics. The term lowbrow, which today refers to someone who's uncultured, derives from the old belief that most non-intellectual people have a protruding forehead and a low brow line. This claim, like all other claims of physiognomy, has been refuted. However, physiognomy may contain a kernel of truth, with recent studies suggesting that women do better than chance at figuring out which men are most interested in children merely by looking at still photographs of their faces. And in another study, observers accurately gauge men's tendencies towards physical aggressiveness by glancing briefly at their faces. So how can we distinguish good from bad personality assessments? Well, two criteria for evaluating all tests, including personality tests, are reliability and validity. Keep these dual criteria in mind as we examine the two major types of personality tests, structured and projective tests, or structured and unstructured tests. Some common structured personality tests are the NEO and the MMPI. An example of unstructured personality tests are projective tests. Let's have a look at these in more detail.